When I just broke up with my girlfriend Kate after 2 years of relationship, I started living alone again. I started using Tinder and other dating apps very often. I had been single for several months, and during this time, I had already met several girls. One day, I started actively texting a girl named Spencer. She added me on Snapchat. We texted for a couple of days, but suddenly the communication died down. She just looked at my stories but didn't respond to them. This happened to me often when I was in college, but then I was a 16-year-old teenager. Now, when I'm already in my 20s, I use Tinder and I understand how immature all this online dating of teenagers can be. But now it's a completely different matter. I have an apartment in a small area. I have a Toyota. If you are wondering what I do, then I am a manager in a large company. I have a good salary, and I myself am not ugly, but I got really bored after my ex moved out. I thought I would enjoy being alone and quiet, but after about a month, the novelty wore off. Maybe I just needed a relationship, or I just needed people around me. I was sick of being alone, so I was constantly using dating apps and going on dates just to get out of the house. This happened last December. I posted something on my story that was Christmas related, and guess who commented on my story? It was the same Spencer who I hadn't talked to in weeks and who had been ignoring my messages. She started talking about what we could do for Christmas. We chatted for a while and I suggested the most festive things I could think of. We could go ice skating, go to parks and look at decorations. Then, out of the blue, Spencer suggested decorating my Christmas tree. First of all, I had an artificial tree, but it was in the attic. I told her that I hadn't taken it out yet because it was a two-person job. She said she'd be happy to come over and help. So, I figured why not. I told her to come over around 10 p.m. It was already dark by the time we made the appointment. It was 8:30 a.m. because I remember grabbing my keys and running to the store. When I got home, I vacuumed and mopped the floors. After my breakup with Kate, all the housework that my ex used to do fell on me. Around 10 p.m., I was sitting on the couch watching TV. I was happy that I had prepared everything to please my new friend. I sat and waited for her to text or ring the doorbell. I texted her to let me know when she was coming and eventually thought that she wouldn't come. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. I jumped up on the couch in surprise because I was lost in my thoughts. Spencer came. I was shocked when I saw her. She was a couple of centimeters taller than me. I'm 175 centimeters tall, and she's probably 180. I also immediately noticed that she smelled like she was wearing perfume. We immediately went to the couch and sat down. Spencer sat very close to me, our legs touching. This is where I started to get confused. She looked a little older, maybe a little rougher, than she looked in the pictures. I'm not sure how to explain it. And underneath the overpowering smell of cheap perfume, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a slight hint of body odor in it. The smell completely turned me off and I asked her if she wanted wine. Something about her was off, like she lacked certain social reference points. I handed her the glass and almost immediately she spilled a huge drop of red wine all over my light beige couch. I pulled myself together, but I wanted to scream. I said it was okay and ran to the kitchen for a damp paper towel and a sponge. Returning to the couch, I blotted the stain as quickly as I could. Spencer continued to apologize, and I continued to say that everything was fine. After that, the situation became even more tense, and to defuse the situation, I offered to take the tree from the attic. I went up to the attic, took the box with all the parts and began to pass them to her one by one. Each next part was bigger and bigger until we got to the largest one, which I would not be able to carry down the stairs alone, and she took it with ease. When all the parts were passed, I went downstairs and we assembled the tree in the living room. I turned on Christmas music and poured her more wine and drank a little myself. I relaxed a little. Wine always helps me relax, in any situation. I looked at the assembled tree. It was time to hang the decorations. I told her that all my decorations were in the basement. They were decorations from my childhood. My parents gave me a whole bunch of Christmas decorations. I went down to the basement and started taking out the boxes, one by one, leaving Spencer in the living room to rest. While I was doing this, I felt myself getting dizzy. I was never a big drinker, so I have a low tolerance for alcohol, but I hadn't had enough to feel sick. I took the first box and dragged it upstairs. When I got up, Spencer was nowhere to be seen. I figured she was in the bathroom and called out to her. I looked in every room, even the bathroom, but they were all empty. Confused, I scratched my head and continued calling her. I texted her on Snapchat, but she never responded. I checked the second bedroom, but she was gone too. I couldn't believe it, she ran away from me. Then I started to think that she considers me a freak or weird. Although to be honest, I myself was not delighted with her. I collapsed on the couch, which suddenly seemed much more comfortable to me than before. And as far as I remember, I periodically checked my phone to see if she had opened my message. I sat on the couch and just watched TV until I passed out. I swear, I just passed out, and then woke up in the dark. There was no light, not even from the TV, it was turned off. I looked around the dark room and realized that I was not imagining it. I felt like I was still lying on the couch and was very weak. It was hard for me to move, but I quickly found my phone and looked at the time. As soon as the phone screen lit up, I saw it. Even though the light was directed at me, I saw the outline of a tall person standing in front of me. For some reason, I didn't scream, I just put the phone down and the room went dark again. I finally opened my mouth to call out to Spencer. I hoped it was her, but I still couldn't remember what happened before. Whoever was standing there didn't answer me. Finally, I picked up the phone again and turned on the flashlight and saw that Spencer was indeed standing in front of me. She didn't move, she just stood there and looked at me. I felt like I was rooted to the couch. Like sleep paralysis, I think everyone has experienced that. I don't know if it was because of fear or because she drugged me, but I really had a hard time moving. I felt weak and helpless. The only thing I could say was her name, Spencer. She turned to the stairs and I swear she ran down and all I heard was her footsteps. Then I heard something slam downstairs. Looking around I realized it was the front door. Everything seemed so strange. In those minutes when I woke up, with each passing minute, I felt better and better and it became easier to move. I checked the chat and saw that her account had disappeared, that is, she blocked me. I looked out the window and did not see a single car outside. except for mine and the neighbors. And then I realized that I did not see the car she arrived in or whether she arrived in a car at all. I checked the whole house from top to bottom. I was looking to see if anything was missing. At first I thought that only strange things were missing, but then I realized that this was not so. All my pills were gone, all my vitamins, supplements, even my bladder pills that I was prescribed after surgery but never took. It was all in a drawer next to my bed. I noticed a bottle of vodka was missing from my mini fridge in my room, but nothing else was missing. I immediately called the police and reported it stolen. I gave them my Snapchat number and explained that I didn't know her real name, other than what she told me, Spencer. The police knocked on my neighbor's door because our houses are connected. Even though it was already about 1 a.m., I was standing next to them and they asked him if he had seen or heard anything strange. To which he replied no, he was asleep. After 20 minutes. The police left. I made sure all my keys were there so she couldn't come back. But other than that, I knew she was acting weird from the moment I met her, and it explains a lot. I can't even call it a theory because I just know it's true. I think this girl, or woman, was older than she said. And maybe homeless with a serious drug addiction. I think she doused herself with perfume to cover up the body odor that was still there. She obviously spiked my wine while I was in the attic. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but it was long enough for her to search the entire house for drugs and supplements. I still remember how scared I was by her tall, slender body when I first woke up on the couch. Honestly, I didn't even decorate the tree that year after that. It all happened on Christmas Eve. Christmas has always been a family holiday for me. However, that year things were different. I had just moved to a new city for work and found myself alone, far from friends and family. To avoid spending the holiday alone, I decided to stay home and relax. I decorated a small Christmas tree, turned on some movies, and put dinner in the oven. It seemed like nothing special, but it was enough to make me feel a little better. The evening was quiet until the doorbell rang. I was surprised. I was not expecting anyone. A man stood at the threshold, wrapped in an old coat, with a long scarf and a hat that covered almost his entire face. His eyes looked tired, but his polite smile seemed to try to smooth over the tension. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "My car broke down nearby and my phone is dead. Could you help?" At first I was wary, but his appearance did not inspire fear. Besides, it was a holiday, and in the spirit of Christmas, I decided to help. I invited him in so he could warm up while I checked his phone charger. He sat down on the couch and I went into the kitchen. When I returned, he was gone. I heard the floorboards creak upstairs. "Hey, where are you going?" I called. There was no answer. So I headed upstairs, feeling a chill run down my spine. The footsteps led me to my bedroom door. I opened it, but there was no one in the room. Only the window was slightly open, and the cold air burned my skin. When I went back downstairs, I felt that something was wrong. The man was nowhere to be found, and along with him, my car keys, which were lying on the nightstand by the door, were gone. I tried to call the police, but my phone had no signal. The internet was also gone. I sat on the couch, trying to figure out what to do next, and noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were fingerprints on the glass coffee table. They were strange, as if someone with long, curved fingernails had left them on the surface. I couldn't remember if the man had touched the table. I barely slept that night, listening to every sound in the house. The next morning, I went outside to check if my car was still there. It was there, but there was something strange written on the hood. It was as if someone had used a frostbitten or mangled finger to write the words, "Merry Christmas. We'll meet again." The police never found the man. To make matters worse, no one in the area had seen anyone crash on the road that night. After that night, I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that it was just a strange incident. Maybe the man really was a con artist who just wanted to scare me. But the more I tried to forget, the more often the smallest details popped into my head. It all started a few days later. I noticed things in the house moving around. At first, it was little things. A book on the coffee table was in the kitchen. A picture frame on the shelf was upside down. I thought I was just forgetting. But one night, I woke up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was standing next to my bed. The room was dark, but I could feel someone's presence. My heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I tried to turn on the nightlight on the nightstand. But it didn't work. It was only when I fumbled for my phone to turn on the flashlight that I realized there was no one there. But there were marks on the floor near the bed, as if someone had been standing barefoot. I decided to install cameras in the house. I needed to understand if all this was really happening or if I was going crazy. I spent the first night with the cameras in the kitchen, watching the footage in real time. Everything was quiet. But on the third night, I noticed something strange. The camera in the living room recorded movement at 2 in the morning. A figure appeared on the screen. A person stood in the corner of the room, almost merging with the shadows. It was the same man in the long coat and hat, but now his face was more clearly visible. It looked unnatural, too pale, with dark hollows where the eyes should be. He stood motionless for several minutes before disappearing, literally dissolving into thin air. I wanted to call the police, but what would I tell them? That someone had appeared in the house and then disappeared. I tried to find information about this person. I asked neighbors, Googled strange occurrences in the area. And one day I managed to stumble upon an article. It told about an old house that burned down a few years ago nearby. They said that the fire happened on Christmas Day, and the lonely man who lived there died. The firefighters found his remains near the door, as if he tried to get out, but did not have time. Over time, as locals claimed, strange things began to happen in this area. People saw a figure in a coat, heard footsteps in their homes. After this discovery, I could no longer stay in the house. I sold it and moved, deciding to leave this place in the past, but sometimes, especially in December, I feel a strange chill, even if the house is warm. At such moments, I find myself checking the windows and doors, as if I were waiting for someone to knock on my door again. And every time I hope that I will not hear this sound again. It happened the night before Christmas. Maggie and her younger brother Tom's parents had gone to dinner with friends, leaving the children alone at home. The house was decorated with garlands, a fire was crackling in the fireplace, and beautifully wrapped presents stood under the tree. Maggie, who was 12, knew that her parents would not return until midnight, and promised to look after 8-year-old Tom. Everything was quiet and calm. They were watching an old Christmas movie, when suddenly there was a loud knock on the door. Maybe it's my parents, Tom suggested, but when Maggie went to the window and looked out, she didn't see them. A man in a Santa suit was standing on the threshold. His red outfit was covered with snowflakes, and his white beard hung unnaturally low. He stood motionless, looking straight at the door. "Who is it?" Tom asked, looking over his sister's shoulder. "I don't know," Maggie said, her throat going dry. Santa started knocking louder. "Children, I know you're home." His deep voice came. "I brought presents." Maggie quickly closed the curtains and grabbed Tom's hand. "Don't open the door," she said, trying to sound confident. "It's not the real Santa." Tom nodded, but his eyes were full of fear. The knocking stopped, and the house fell silent. The children stood in the living room, listening to every sound. Suddenly they heard footsteps outside. The crunch of boots in the snow. The man in the Santa suit began to walk around the house. "I'll still find a way in," he said from outside, his voice threatening. Maggie locked all the doors and checked the windows. She knew she couldn't panic, or Tom would be scared too. "We need to call the police," she whispered to her brother. They quickly climbed into their parents' bedroom, where the phone was. Maggie quickly dialed 911, but the phone only beeped. There was no connection. She looked at the screen, trying to call back, but the result was the same. "What happened?" Tom asked, his voice shaking. "The phone isn't working," Maggie whispered, trying not to panic. "But it'll be okay." At that moment, they heard the lock of the front door creak from outside. Someone was fiddling with the handle, as if trying to open it. "Maggie. He's trying to get in." Tom cried out in fear. "Quiet," she ordered, grabbing his hand. "We need to hide." Maggie pulled her brother into the closet, where they could lock the door from the inside. It was a cramped space, filled with boxes and winter coats. They hid, trying not to make a sound. Outside, they could hear Santa continuing to pound on the door. His voice became louder and more ominous. "Children, you know you can't hide from me. Christmas is a time for sharing, so open the door and get your presents." Maggie held Tom's hand, feeling him tremble. She tried to think of a plan. "If the police aren't answering, we should try to get to the neighbors," she thought, but before she could do anything, the house was filled with an eerie sound. A window was breaking. Santa had found a way inside. "Now I'm here," he said, pleased. Tom began to sob, but Maggie pressed her finger to her lips, motioning for him to be quiet. They heard heavy footsteps on the floor. Santa was walking around the house, searching every room. "Come on, guys, I just want to have fun." His voice echoed through the empty hallways. Maggie knew they couldn't stay in the pantry for long. Her gaze fell on the small window above them. It was narrow, but maybe big enough for them to get out. "Tom, you first," she whispered, helping him up onto the shelves. Santa was already close, his footsteps very close. Maggie struggled to lift Tom, and he huddled out. "Now you, Maggie," he whispered from outside. She started to climb, but at that moment the pantry door shook from. "I found you," he shouted. Maggie wasted no time in pushing herself out, her hands scraping against the wooden frames. As soon as her feet were in the snow, she grabbed Tom's hand and they ran away. There was a crash behind them as Santa had kicked down the door and was chasing them. "Where are you going? The holidays are just beginning." He was heard screaming. Maggie and Tom ran to the next house. It was Mr. Henderson's house, an elderly man who lived at the end of the street. They started banging on his door as hard as they could. When the door finally opened, Mr. Henderson looked stunned. "What happened?" he asked. "Call the police," Maggie screamed. "He's in there, he's coming for us." Mr. Henderson quickly let the children in and locked the door. He took out his phone and called 911. A few minutes later, sirens were wailing outside. The police arrived and surrounded Maggie's house. Santa was captured as he tried to escape through the backyard. It was later revealed that the man was a dangerous criminal who had been hiding for years under the guise of a good-natured Santa. When Maggie and Tom's parents returned home, they were shocked to learn what had happened. Maggie became a real heroine, having saved her, but even after the arrest of that man, the children could not sleep for a long time. Every knock at the door reminded them of the night when evil came to them in the guise of Santa.